Hey, everybody. Welcome to Thursday Night Book Club. My name is Leah Pearson. I'm an Emerald Ambassador, and tonight we are going over part 3, chapters 1 through 3, I guess is what you call it, of how to win friends and influence people. And I kind of always, when I'm like doing personal growth stuff, I think I like to read things and then kind of take a look at like a broad brushstroke of what they're talking about, and then try to apply it to me personally and my business. And I know that's what we try to do at this book club, is to take general personal growth and then apply it to how can we utilize this in our businesses. And so that's kind of what I am going to do for the first couple minutes here. Just some thoughts that I had as I was reading in personal notes, and then we can open it up for discussion. But a lot of what he was talking about was like really conflict and like arguing and how to not do that. And my first thought after reading all of this was that this is really a biblical principle, because the Bible says that the kindness of God leads people to repentance. It's not the wrath of God. It's not, like being in people's face that leads them to repentance. It's the kindness of God. And really, the word repentance means a changing of your mind or direction. And we are really to model that in our life, right? And so if we want to change people's thoughts or directions, we need to lead with kindness and with humility. And I think that those were two words that kept coming to mind as I read these chapters, was kindness and humility. Also ownership, I would say. And I don't know if I was going to go back and kind of scan, and I don't know if he actually used either of those two words, but that was just kind of the feel that I had with what he was talking about. And in regards to personal growth, different personalities have different things they need to work on. So if you are maybe, I know we've got different personality typings that we do or whatever, but if you're like a blue or a yellow personality, you might have looked at these chapters and thought like, I'm good, I don't argue, right? Or if you're a 9, you might be like, I'm the peacemaker, like I've got this down. But you certainly are going to have people that are coming at you at different times. So it still is helpful for you. And I also think that it's good to look at these chapters as like your peacemaking skills and your tendencies can be powerful, and you can harness those things for good, that they're actually strengths that make you great with people. And that's empowering, that you can be super successful at this business because you've got those great people skills. And your personal growth might lie more in lines of how to maybe speak up in some scenarios. And I think that's what's so helpful to with finding out like your personality types, is it shows where you need that personal growth or what your tendencies are, so that you are able to be mindful of that and grow in those areas. And so I definitely think those are good tools. I highly recommend them. And we're all different and we all have different growth needs. If you're more of a red personality or more of like a confronting, like Enneagram, the ones that came to mind were like maybe 1s, 3s, 8s, I don't know. This is a great place for you to grow in. And so if you are more of a red personality, did you find these chapters to be kind of difficult to swallow, or were you like, yes, I need to work on this? Type it in the chat and let me know. And so I think that it's also fun to see that, you were made on purpose and uniquely, and God placed you in this business for a reason. And you can learn a lot of things from the people around you too. So for instance, I'm an Enneagram 8, and I do tend to like speak up about some things. I do think I've grown a lot in that, but 8s are like all about justice and being right sometimes. And I definitely am more of a red personality, but I can tell because of the association that I've had in my life and the people that I've surrounded myself with, I've learned humility and people skills. And honestly, like pre-Jesus, I was probably kind of blunt and harsh. And I'm really thankful for transformation. And I know that humility is super important. And even, early on in my business, I think so often we think that our sponsors are in our life and play the role of helping teach us like specific business skills. but you can also learn a lot of interpersonal things and how to like communicate with people and things like that from the people in your life, from association with even like these book clubs and team calls, and then being in like, that's another shout out for three-way chats, being in three-way chats with your sponsors. So early on, not only was I learning business skills from Jamie, but I know that God paired me with one of the nicest people on the face of the planet. And she taught me how I could really do a good job of more effectively communicating with people, right? So I just wanted to share all that and kind of open with that to remind you that we can all grow, and your Enneagram or typing or whatever is not a crutch, but it's something to bring awareness to. So, and that the law of association is super important, not just for business skills, but also for how to deal with people. And reach out to your sponsor. Like if you don't know how to handle a certain situation, I think it is helpful to go to them and to just kind of process and seek wisdom. So I also wanted to highlight on page 121 and 122, it was talking about Ben Franklin and how he grew in this area. And really, as I read this section, I kind of was just looking at, like I thought you could formulate a lot of what they talked about with him into self-reflecting questions that you can ask yourself for like, yeah, that kind of almost like a plumb line for how you're doing in this area. So, and this all comes right from that section. Do your opinions have a slap in them for everyone who differs with you? I think that's a good question. Are you enjoyable to be around? Do you value what others say, or are you always trying to prove a point? I often ask myself, am I hungry to listen? Do you listen with humility? Are you always the first to speak? Do you correct people often? Do you know so much that no one can tell you anything? It's also noted on page 122 that Ben Franklin was big enough and wise enough to accept rebuke about how he related to others. And so even if you feel like you maybe are answering kind of negatively to some of those questions, you can grow in that right now. Are you easily offended? I thought it was really good that Ben Franklin talked about how he forbidden himself to directly like contradict people too, by saying like stronger phrases like certainly, but instead using things like I imagine. Essentially, it's just more of a humble stance, and a lot. And he found that if he was in fact wrong, people were more gracious about it, which I think is awesome. But if people were, if he found out that he was wrong, people were more gracious. If they were wrong, they were more likely to give up their mistakes and join him just because of his humility. And I really thought the phrase that we use a lot, feel, felt, found, came up to me a lot while I was reading this. For some reason, I think it's just really good, like a really good connecting stance. And I think usually objections seem as if it's almost kind of like an argument or somebody's coming at you with an argument. But if we can humbly connect with them and then share our maybe similar hesitations and what we found, I think that humility is really readily received more often. And then I'm going to end with this. This is not an all-inclusive list, but I was thinking of some different arguments or like disagreements maybe within our businesses that we can apply these chapters to. And anytime you're dealing with people, these kinds of things are going to come up. And I think that if we just like decide ahead of time, we're going to lead with kindness and not let it ruffle our feathers and just love people, it just makes it easier. So I had a frustrated customer today. That was one that came to mind. I had somebody that they wanted to get the free ease and their order was not $149 before tax and shipping. So they didn't get their ease and they were really upset about it. And so I had just finished reading these chapters and I just voice clipped them back and I owned it. I'm like, you know what? I was probably not super clear with you. I apologize. And he took it really, really well. So this is somebody that's been heated with me in the past. And I say this to my girls a lot, kill them with kindness. And yeah, I just feel like that's pretty effective. So if you have a frustrated customer, how can you apply this to that conversation? What does that look like? On page 112, it says that you will never get your opponent's goodwill if you're arguing. And in a sense, that makes me think of the words like trust and connection. Goodwill is trust and connection. And if we want goodwill with our customers, which we do, that's really important that we make sure that we have that trust and connection with them. And the last thing that we want is our customers closed off to us. And so making sure that we lead with that kindness, I think, is a really big deal. The same is true for maybe, like I was thinking, a potential who doesn't see the need for the products yet, or maybe we've all had it where people are tooting the horn of a different product and they think it's just the bee's knees, right? So instead of trying to look up all the info on their product and try to explain why Plexus is superior, like, don't try to argue with them. Or if they're like I'm just doing the diet and exercise thing, what can you do with potentials to not argue with them? Do you have any ideas? Put it in the comments. We don't want to go into convincing mode. So I think you can still maintain like solid belief, but I think the key is having that humility as you're going into those conversations with people. And I do think that third-party tools are really helpful at that point too, because then somebody else is backing up what you're saying as well. And then again, like the feel, felt, found thing, because then they feel a connection. And I think that's just a really humble way to engage in conversation. Another one I was thinking about is if you're reaching out to a potential about the business and then they hammer you with I don't support MLMs, or maybe make a snarky remark about network marketing or whatever. I have found that asking more questions and being genuinely interested in them is really, really helpful. So rather than getting defensive right away, rather than arguing, just ask them a simple question. I think a lot of times that stems from like maybe having a bad experience with network marketing, or somebody that was maybe in their face or pushy, or they just don't know enough. And so just stepping back and saying, oh, have you had a bad experience in the past, or something like that, is a really great way to connect. And like, I'm sorry, just show that you care and maybe validate. And then I think that empathy is really the doorway to conversation with people. Also, like, just think about, and I'm not going to go into all this because I'll open up for discussion, but like if somebody is going through detox, like how do you share with them, the benefits of pushing through? How can you apply what we read in these chapters if they're like, I don't want to do this anymore, this is too hard? How can you meet them with that? When you're being coached and your sponsor sharing feedback on things that would be helpful for your business, where's your heart at? How's your posture with that? Do you listen eagerly? Do you apply the feedback right away? Things like that. When someone maybe belittles your business or your dreams or your vision, do you try to argue and defend your stance right away? Do you let it bother you? I think a really powerful way to deal with a lot of conflict, what I found, is just to ask more questions and get curious as to their stance and let them talk more. Like, you don't have to be the one talking. That has been probably the most effective thing for me. And then if you're coaching somebody and maybe they're not taking feedback, rather than just trying to like put it in their face, it might be helpful to ask some questions. Like if they have a certain goal, asking them, how are you going to reach that goal? Like, what does that look like? What do you need to be doing? What kind of action steps to get there? Again, like really just thinking, okay, what question can I ask here? And then also, of course, like gaining access to them. So by asking, if I saw something that's holding you back, would you be open to me telling you about it? This essentially asks them if they're willing to listen. Like, it puts them in a state of humility where they're saying, yes, I want to listen to what you have to say because I see the benefit of this. Which I think is a great reminder for us all. Like, your sponsor's giving feedback because their heart is for you, and having a general spirit of humility and openness is a big key to wisdom. And the Bible says that humility leads to wisdom and honor. So I'm going to stop there. I would love to hear from any of the sections. You guys take it away.
So I definitely really felt some conviction in the aspect of, rather than having to defend like what your thoughts are, what your intentions are, or what was happening, right? And that almost like willingness to be like, okay, yep, I'm wrong, like that, not that you're like wrong per se, like I loved how you said like there's sometimes that feeling of like, that you're right so strongly, that it's really hard to just be like, okay, yeah, we can go along with like your perception. And so I was thinking about some just different situations, you know, with customers and stuff, kind of like you said, like about your salty customer. I actually had someone also upset about the ease thing this month, and it was like the same situation. It was like 68 cents or something, like super silly like that. And they were, you know, just like so upset about it. And even though we got it all handled, I think now, like after the fact and after, you know, reading these chapters, what if I, you know, would have just been like, you know, I'm really sorry. I should have been sure to explain to you, you know, the same thing you said. And so I wonder, like, having that approach and essentially being like, okay, I'm wrong, even if we're not really, you know, how that can go such a long ways, and it's such a little thing to humble ourselves in that way. um and then I was even thinking of like situations like with my husband and like stuff like that where I could probably do that and be like, okay, yep, like my bad, you know. So for me, that's, I think, the part of this reading that stuck out the biggest to me is just how far that can take you, and it's such a little thing to do, and it's just one of those like tiny little micro choices, you know, that if we can just be very intentional about that, it can make huge differences. And so that's like something that I feel like I'm going to really try harder to work on, because I can just see the benefits of it, you know, overall. So
Yeah, that's really good. I think it's a fine line of like knowing the truth in regards to what we have with the products and the business, and not ever wavering in your belief with those, but you can still come across in a very humble, kind way. Um, yeah, that's a fine line, but you can definitely maintain your stance.
To that point, Leah, that like I was reading that first example where they just like conceded, was like, you're right. And you know, like that is not in the, or that is in the Bible or something. I'm like, I could never do that. Like I could never do that, but I am learning over time. Like my integrity won't let me do that. Just let somebody like say, it's almost a lie too, like to be blatantly say that it's the wrong thing. But that being said, it definitely proved a point. And like I think, you know, my personality type, I've learned over the years to, you know, choose my battles, and, you know, not, it's not always, you know, it isn't always worth it to be right, you know. And, you know, you can concede and decide not to engage in an argument without lying. You know, that's kind of what was my take on it. You don't have to be like, you're right, but you can just be like, you know, okay, you know, like, and change the subject or whatever, and be humble and move on and not decide to engage in it. And that's kind of what I took from that.
I was not okay with that part. I was like, you can't lie.
So weird. I thought it was so weird. I was like, what?
It's like, I'll
I
concede,
get
like
the
you
point.
said, but I can't lie.
Yes.
It's not in the Bible.
It's not in the Bible.
Um,
There's a lot of with these chapters that come into play in terms of obviously like growth and emotional maturity and leadership. And, you know, we work in a business with people. And when you work with people, you're going to have so many things that come up that is, you're just going to have emotions run high. You're going to have different opinions. You're going to have different personalities, and they're not always going to be smooth together. You're going to have clashes, right? So I think all this is so important for that reason. And just knowing, just from things they said in different parts of these chapters, knowing and having that perspective, one, to first always want to attempt to know where the other person is coming from, to know that they are coming from somewhere, even if you feel like you're 100% right, trying to gain their perspective, trying to have some thoughts on that. And then on the other hand of it, knowing also that they just want to maybe be heard or feel important, like he said in this book, right? And then also, if it is on a topic that you're working with someone on, or when there's differing opinions, he pointed out just knowing that, you know, that means they care, right? So even if you don't agree, they care just as much as you maybe care, and just have kind of a, you know, butting heads or whatever. So being able to diffuse situations, knowing yourself in those moments. Also on page 115, he goes through a bunch of questions I think are really helpful. Anytime that you naturally feel kind of defensive and you want to just like, you know, have your say or whatever, being able to take that pause and realize, one, I mean, it shows really high leadership and emotional maturity, knowing that you don't have to have the last word or be the one that proves that you're right, or even point out a fault later when, you know, maybe they might say something, and refrain from opening your mouth and saying that, oh, you know, oh yeah, I said that or whatever, you know. But those questions are really good. You know, is your reaction gonna actually help the problem, or is it going to make it worse? Is it going to drive someone further away from you, or is it going to actually, you know, bring them closer? Is it going to elevate the situation? Is it, you know, are you going to win or lose? And if you win, is there a cost to that even? So just a lot of good reflection questions there too. And yeah, that's all I got right now, I guess. Just some thoughts.
I had that one highlighted and lots of red on that as well. But one thing that my book must be weird. Does anyone else have this green one? It's like a tiny version and all the page numbers are different, so I always feel lost. But anyway, it said to look for the areas of agreement and trying to find common ground. And I was like trying to think of how that relates in our business and just trying to get back to common ground with people, like especially newer ones that want to bail really fast, or like or you know, with a couple examples today of things that were just frustrations for people, like what kinds of questions would get us back to common ground of like can we agree on what your goals are in this? Can we agree on like that we're going to work together on it and we're a team in helping you get there? Just trying to find ways to get common ground back and build some of that trust. And what's the other, where did it go? I don't know, just, yeah, that our natural reaction just to not be defensive right away or feel like we're kind of hand up a little bit, but to be a little more open-handed and inviting in instead of trying to prove our point about anything, just listening and trying to find the common grounds we do have and verbally say them so that they can hear that we're trying to, you know, work through these things together. So good reminders.
I wanted to speak to the, I guess the argument part, like in the beginning of part 3. So I just wanted to give a little bit of like real life application stuff for this coming from a red. So I wouldn't consider myself argumentative. I would consider myself opinionated. And I don't often voice those opinions unless they're asked of. And the reason why is because I have concluded that arguments are for ego and curiosity is for connection. If you want to connect with people, you'll be curious, you'll ask questions, you'll be invested in their answers, you'll have empathy, you know, you will genuinely be looking to them for feedback instead of being consumed with voicing your own opinion or being understood or agreed with on your opinion. So that's just kind of, it's been a growth point for me, because I would say definitely in the past, I would be more concerned with getting a point across or convincing somebody of something, but it really does not get you anywhere. Convincing people is not the route. So connecting with them and just honestly hearing them out is so much better.
That section really resonated with me too, in part because I have found myself, courtesy of it helping being pointed out to me, that naturally in my prospecting conversations, not so much that I was being argumentative, but I would have a tendency to want to overhandle an objection with almost too much information or being too correct instead of keeping the conversation going by continuing to ask questions and connect and engage. So yes, by inadvertently going into convincing mode without even realizing I was going into convincing mode, in my mind, I was going into education mode. So I think that that's something to be kind of mindful too, is that you can almost find yourself going there with, it doesn't necessarily have to be heated for it to be potentially argumentative or involve conflict, I guess you could say. So anyways, I thought I would just point that out, that I kept writing over here, no convincing mode, don't go there.
Just quick for me, resounding word that stuck out was humility and just being humble and admitting, you know, when you're wrong, but also just taking a step back and really looking at yourself and I don't know, yeah, these chapters are really good for Sue, really good.
I think we all felt some conviction.
I mean, I like to be right.
Mm. We
Sorry.
all do. Yeah. Yep. I was thinking that Messenger is actually kind of nice because it's not like a live conversation. Like you can pause and think before you respond to somebody. Like I do think that that is a good thing sometimes.
For sure.
Sometimes I'll write out my direct answer and then I'll go back and be like, okay, now how do I connect? Like leave the meat of the answer, but then how do I make this like fluffy? How do I make it friendly?
Add some emojis, exclamation points, heart, heart. 24-hour rule. Yeah, that's good wisdom. Sometimes you can't wait that long, but Messenger gives you a little pause. It's 10 o'clock.
I have to say
Anybody
that-
else?
I was just gonna say, I have to say the area that I've grown the most in is probably the argumentative area. Because I am so red that I just love to be right. And I love to just nope, this is the way, this is how you do it. This is the way you go. This is the direction we're moving. Like, get on or get off. Like, I don't like, whatever, what are you doing? You know? And I think it's just it's important to note that it's such an area that you can grow in. You don't have, like you said, Leah, earlier, that you don't have to use your number or your color or as a crutch. There's areas of growth there and you can totally grow in that area. Because I will say, if you met me, Em could probably attest to this more than anyone else. If you met me probably 15 years ago and you came up against something I didn't agree with, I'll just gonna tell you what, I don't care if we were friends afterwards. I don't care how you felt afterwards. I'm right. Sorry. And now it's different. I'll meet people and they're like, man, you just have so much grace. And I'm like, well, it's a lot of growth because I've had to really grow in that area a lot. And, like you said, the kill them with kindness, I say the same thing to a lot of my teammates too, because I really do find that you get a lot further instead of getting defensive. You get a lot further with that. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to,
miscommunicate or like say the wrong, like whatever, like, how can we fix this? I'm gonna make sure you're happy in the long run, but like, what can we do to fix that? You know, and just kind of going into like, just like Sue said, like humility mode and just owning what you did and just trying to like find the best, you know, the best common ground. And I really like my business thrives because we offer so much grace and we try to act out of humility. We try to like own our stuff. We try to like, you know, not be argumentative. And I think like that's really what has allowed people to feel so welcome in our team and what they're like. I can't tell you how many people like come at me all like frustrated and mad and ticked off. And then when you come back like sweet and like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. They're like, wow, sorry. They're like, I feel like I just shot a puppy or something. You know, they're like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to like come at you like that. Like, it's fine. It's really not a big deal. I'm like, and it's really not. And like my red knows that it's really not a big deal, but I'm going to tell you that like we're owning this and we're going to make you happy. We're going to make it good. You know, and like I love the killing with kindness, like it really stinking works. It works.
Mhm.
And you think about the response of the other person when you are humble and coming to them and admitting you're wrong or whatever. And, you know, he gave lots of examples, but the guy in the park with the dog, right? And the police, you know, and he just admitted it right off. And the response of that person, that police officer, was very kind and yeah, no problem, whatever, you know. So it's just like, yeah, why don't I do that more often? It's just, you know, but we're so caught up in having the last word and being right and all those things, you know. But yeah, it's a good lesson to go in with humbleness, and then also if you're the other person to just give grace, right? And have that kind response too. So work in progress, that's for sure.
Mhm. I like that example better because he wasn't lying that time. He was telling the truth. Anybody else? All right. I think that's a good spot to stop. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your week.